You're listening to Intersections Conversations, a podcast dedicated to nuanced dialogue across cultures, identities, and perspectives. I'm your host, Jason, inviting you to open your mind as we critically and compassionately explore complex modern issues together. This mini-series focuses on raising awareness around the urgent yet overlooked epidemic of microaggressions in society that is the seemingly subtle comments and actions that target oppressed groups. We'll investigate why microaggressions matter even when unintended, the discrimination they enable, and practical solutions individuals and communities can implement to foster more inclusive spaces for all people. I appreciate you joining these crucial conversations as we envision societies centered on mutual respect over marginalization. This session will be a snapshot of the conversations to come. Now let's get started. Episode 1. What are microaggressions? Welcome. This week kicks off a special 5-part deep dive series on the urgent yet overlooked topic of microaggressions, what they are, why they matter, and how we can all help stamp them out for good. You've likely heard the term mentioned recently as diversity trainings and social justice rhetoric goes mainstream. It refers to brief, commonplace, verbal or nonverbal slights against minority groups that seem harmless in isolation yet accumulate serious detriments. Things like asking people of color where they're really from, assigning feminine office tasks to only female staff, or using gay as casual insult. While the person sending a microaggression typically doesn't realize hidden offense in the message. Make no mistake, consistent exposure to small denigrations makes targets feel invisible, abnormal, and unsafe in communities that should provide refuge. And contrary to popular pushback, calling out microaggressions isn't about policing thoughts or demonizing well-meaning people who simply lack context about marginalized experiences. It's about raising group consciousness on patterns enabling harm so we can all do better together. After all, even a single paper cut stings significantly, but imagine dealing with dozens of small cuts each day never given chance to fully heal. Just because prejudice present subtly through microaggressions versus overt discrimination doesn't mean victims don't endure real pain. And in truth, these modern slights allow bigotry to persist and thrive in ways past generations find harder to excuse. So in upcoming episodes, we'll unpack specifics around common workplace, social and cultural microaggressions minorities face, evidence of psychological and physiological consequences, and practical solutions individuals and institutions can implement to foster more inclusive, equitable spaces for all people. I appreciate you tuning in to learn how we make the world safer by beating microaggressions through compassion and moral courage. Episode 2, Examples and Impact. Welcome back, Truth Seekers. Last episode covered the basics defining microaggressions, common forms they take, and importance of taking subtle prejudice seriously despite initial impressions. Today for our ongoing series, we'll expose the false narratives around microaggression targets being overly sensitive crybabies. Research clearly shows detrimental psychological and physiological effects completely justify feelings of frustration and pain at constant social slights. Across marginalized groups, increased microaggressions directly correlate to higher stress levels, depression, and anxiety rates. Institutional betrayal by organizations failing to respond casts doubts whether speaking up holds worth when nothing changes. Many targets thus learn staying silent around oppression seems safer than rocking boat. But even avoiding conflict comes with health consequences. Studies link enduring microaggressions to destructive coping outlets like overeating, drug abuse, self-harm, and not just mental health at stake. The toxic impact of social inequality manifests in cardiovascular disease, stroke, impaired immune function, and alarming lifespans gaps for marginalized groups, especially intersectional identities facing double barriers. See how the danger multiplies without intervention. Microaggressions mutually reinforce psychological and physiological decline. Job performance suffers, networks and advancement opportunities constrict, and health risks keep vulnerable communities stuck fighting for basic safety needs, much less pursuing leadership, influence, or sociocultural prosperity. And the kicker is how quickly presence piles up absent serious effort to curb microaggressions culture. A comment here, a joke there, an offhanded preference stated casually around certain groups before long aggregate message embedded in a workplace or classroom poisons entire atmospheres. Yeah, soon targets exhaust from continually pushing back, instead letting silence signal acceptance of inferior positions. No one's best selves emerge like this. So next time we'll map solutions, both self-work individuals can adopt building consciousness of unintended offenses we commit, as well as professional development, improving organizational climates overall. The goal of this series stays taking the micro focus off petty drama between well-intended people and onto unjust patterns quietly undermining human dignity across groups. Episode 3, Individual Responsibility. We're back, allies. Last session covered the high personal and professional cost of leaving microaggressions unchecked for oppressed groups' mental health and advancement, but someone always asks next, what can sincerely well-meaning folks do to help? As in most institutional issues, solutions require both individual and systemic responsibility. On the personal front, our own contributions matter through self-education, perspective taking, and speaking up in defense of marginalized coworkers, friends, and strangers. No person immune from absorbing problematic societal biases around race, gender, orientation, disability, class, and other identity intersections, and refusing to check personal prejudice merely embeds toxic messaging further. Do the work, friends. Writing by minority authors detailing common slights they endure, from major media moguls to random gas station clerks, assuming suspicion. Follow social media accounts directly showcasing oppressive encounters. Notice who occupies leadership roles surrounding you, the decision makers shaping environments you inhabit. Does representative diversity match the bold corporate mission statements hanging in lobbies? Pay attention to interpersonal interactions too. The offhanded jokes thrown around happy hours, the backhanded compliments assuming whites' own professionalism, the appropriated cultural elements treated as costume. Then speak up, uncovering latent bias in the moment. As Desmond Tutu wisely advised, if you are neutral in situations of injustice, you have chosen the side of the oppressor. And offering quick education protects victims from exhausting emotional labor. Come back next episode as we tackle organizational responsibilities to back up, talk with policy protecting inclusive behavior standards. Smart companies realize microaggressions directly undermine production by alienating minority talent from feeling psychological safety to connect, create, and lead authentically without continual code switching. They invest in the learning curves. Understanding modern prejudice manifests more subtly, yet no less harmfully than past generations' assumptions around supremacy. And working collectively to disrupt systemic microaggressions releases social prosperity for all citizenry to mutually pursue. Episode 4, Organizational Change. We're back for the penultimate session, allies. Last week focused on individuals gaining awareness of complicity in modern prejudice through microaggression. But organizations to maintain responsibility for enabling cultural spaces where racism, sexism, homophobia, transphobia, ableism, and other marginalizations slip undetected in interpersonal exchanges, collectively poisoning work academic environments. In reality, patterned microaggressions signal infected climates from the top down. They thrive where leadership lacks representation and lends to implement sufficient protections, accountability channels, or restorative processes addressing reported bias incidents. Those facing daily sly comments about surprising intellect or backhanded praise for not matching stereotypes simply exhaust battling uphill. The solution requires immediate strategic priorities, shining a light on micro-level toxicity creeping beneath shallow corporate mission statements, broadcasting commitment to types of diversity easily captured through photography. Organizations must move from surface-level posters containing assorted skin tones to sponsoring professional development around cultural consciousness, raising as lifelong practice. And executives exhibit greatest power through consistent messaging that microaggressive speech proves unconditionally unacceptable, paired with transparent action steps tying employee codes of conduct to real-world repercussions for those refusing education around harm caused marginalized coworkers and customers. Fostering safety for minority advancement means leaders initiating cultural shifts beyond legal compliance. The incentives connect clearly to, beyond genuinely embracing ethical imperative to honor human dignity. Research shows diversity drives innovation, productivity, and profits in competitive marketplaces. Fiat lies ensuring inclusion too, that underrepresented groups feel valued, contributing authentically rather than pressured code switching in assimilationist environment. There we find the heart of solving microaggressions. Belonging starts with feeling respected across lines of difference, not despite them. Come back next week for the exciting conclusion. Episode 5, Imagining Microaggression-Free Futures. At last, we come to the finale of our microaggression series. Loyal listeners, We've built foundations understanding subtle prejudice, debunked myths around oversensitivity, connected psychological and physiological harm of uninterrupted oppressive patterns, and outlined individual and organizational responsibilities to consciously counter discrimination, enabling one comment at a time. Imagine the inspiration unleashed in schools, businesses, and neighborhoods when we collectively defeat insidious forces dividing human family for ego protection and in-group preference. Differences finally honored as assets. Decision makers actively seeking wide representation. Policies weighed through lenses of accessible consideration, not privilege assumption. And restored agency for minorities to name offenses without gaslighting against lived oppressions built by centuries of barred access now embedded structurally in biased norms. Policies weighed through lenses of accessible consideration, not privileged assumption. And restored agency for minorities to name offenses without gaslighting against lived oppressions built by centuries of barred access now embedded structurally in biased norms. That wraps our time together for this episode of Intersections Conversations mini-series exploring the pressing issue of microaggressions. I want to thank loyal listeners seeking to understand barriers minorities face in homes, schools, and workplaces through continual subtle prejudice. If you appreciate our approach diving into racial justice, LGBT inclusion, gender equity, and other social reform topics with intellectual rigor and empathy, make sure to subscribe for future series released every month. And please rate and review the show so we can uplift more marginalized voices. See you in our next series as we continue conversations, equipping you with tools to challenge patterns that are enabling oppression through microaggressive discrimination. And please subscribe and share so we can continue to empower you to use as your voice. See you in our next series as we continue conversations, equipping you with tools to challenge patterns that are enabling oppression through microaggressive discrimination. Be well.